All right, Bus Bench Babes. This week on the podcast, we have Conor Hesch. This guy is like one of the top mortgage advisors in the Twin Cities, and he really specializes in helping people become investors. And we have so many women that listen to this podcast that are like, we want to know all the things. So let's dive in and we're going to learn all the things.
You're listening to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in. Hi, Conor.
Hey.
Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Sorry, I was waiting for the intro music to play.
No, all of the intro music gets added after the fact. Okay, so today we have Conor Hesch, and he is of the Closing With Conor team. You may or may not have seen him on social. He is really good on the gram. And he is a mortgage advisor with Bell Bank Mortgage, and he's been in the real estate business for a long time.
17 years.
17 years. Well, so you and I just recently met in real life. So I've been following you on social for a long time. And I love that you walk the walk and you talk the talk. I think that's what I was most impressed with what you put out on social media, is that you're showing behind the scenes, shoveling mulch and doing the work on your multi-units. And it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think I never finished architecture school. So there's a part of me that loves to over-improve rental properties. It's how I get my kicks. So yeah, no, it does help when you're working with someone who walks the talk as well.
I think so. There's a lot of people that are like, here, do what I say, and then they don't practice what they preach. So I like that you are actually in the trenches doing this day in and day out. But when you're not working on your investment properties, what do you do for fun?
Work on my investment properties. No.
Well, and tell us about yourself. Where'd you come from? Tell us a little backstory.
Well, I'm born and raised in Minnesota. And for fun, I like to golf, but I'm not good at it. I love being in water, especially love jet skiing or boat stuff, even though I didn't grow up with that. I think my spirit animal used to be a gorilla, but I think it's more of a manatee because I just love being submerged.
They're like gentle giants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
they're always in water. And the older I get, the more I just want to be around water. So anything with water is fun for me.
Do you like to travel? You have any pets?
Yeah, I do like to travel a bit when I can. My girlfriend doesn't like traveling so much, so I think we kind of hang out around here.
Yeah.
We've got a dog, and I'm terrible. He sleeps in the bed, kiss him on the mouth, love that guy. He's like my son.
Well, I mean, my cat is here in the room while we're recording the podcast, if that tells you how we are with our pet around here too. So I feel you on that. Okay, so the main reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because I love how passionate you are about investing and helping other people become investors. And there's just not a lot of people really kind of make it their mission. And it feels, I don't know if you feel like it's your mission. To me, on the outside looking in, it feels like it's part of your mission. And I think there's so many women that are sitting on the sidelines oh, could I possibly do that? I think of most of the people that I know that are investors with multi-units and duplexes, fourplexes. It seems like they're all guys. And I even get the FOMO, why can't I be doing this? Or why am I not doing this? I know I probably could be, but I don't even know where to start. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I really wanted to pick your brain a lot for my own satisfaction, but also for our listeners. I think it's important for all of them. why was getting into real estate investing important to you for like your own personal portfolio?
Well, I was broke. I was looking for a way to enter home ownership and have it be affordable. I had a lot of credit card debt, a lot of student loan debt. I had been carrying it for years. I'm talking making the minimum payments, but not paying it off. And
while you were in the mortgage business or prior to this, like
while I was in the mortgage business. Yeah. And so, living through the first crash recession of 2008, while being a mortgage advisor and things like that. Also just being a young person. You usually, when you're younger, you start out with debt. You don't have a large net worth when you're 20. Right. What little money you get is spent doing things 20-year-olds like to do. So part of that growth is just sort of life. And I really detest arrogance and elitism, because anyone who's cool, I can show you somebody cooler. Anyone who says they have a lot of money, well, there's somebody with more money. Right. I mean, this isn't New York or LA. This is Minnesota.
Right.
So I really don't like the people that try to think they're big shots because they're an investor or throw that around. I mean, can you call yourself an author if you just wrote an article once? So
a lot of people do.
Yeah. So yeah. I like to try to break that down and show people the steps. A mountain can feel intimidating, but it's really just a series of hiking trails, and everyone's gone on a hike. So because I don't like arrogant sort of elitism, and because my parents are both teachers, I think somewhere I ended up doing a lot of preaching and teaching and trying to get people to drink the Kool-Aid. Because
you're doing a good job of it.
The duplexes and the fourplexes and the multifamily investments helped me get out of debt. It started as just a way to get into home ownership. Mm-hmm. And
so you bought your first place and then lived in one side and rented out the other? Is that what that looked like?
Absolutely. Yeah. And now people will say that's house hacking.
Yeah. That's not what it was called back then when you started doing it.
No, I don't even know if it had a
sexy name like it does now.
No, I love that it's got a brand.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
Which I encourage. So what started as a way for me to enter housing, I didn't know it was going to become a whole second income source or a whole sort of portfolio. And I didn't know it was going to become a business niche. I didn't know I was going to become good at showing people the path and helping them to avoid certain pitfalls that I experienced. So
cool.
Here we are.
I love it. Well, so our podcast is all about women empowerment, and we are all about it here. And like I found you told me that your team is just jam-packed with women, and we love that. How can we help more women like enter this space? Like, what does that look like? Like, what are you doing from that standpoint? I know you've told me like you have investors on, like some of the women on your team have become investors. Like, what does that look like? How did that all start?
Yeah. A lot of women on my team have now purchased multiple properties, whether it's a property that they use in Florida, because you can buy a cabin or a vacation home for only 10% down. So that's kind of another alternative.
A lot of people don't even know about that.
Yeah. So instead of going maybe the multifamily route, you can buy a 1-unit investment property, whether it's Airbnb or renting it to family and friends. So people on my team have either purchased vacation property or purchased multiple duplexes in this area. And I think a lot of what I do is just have informal conversations. I think a lot of the transactional lenders out there really just want to keep some sort of stiff upper lip until you apply online. And that's because they're looking at this from a sales standpoint. Mm-hmm. They don't want to share info unless they're going to close a loan or get a transaction. Right. And the problem with there is now we're withholding information. And the more that you can share information, the better people do.
Right.
So a lot of what I do is just informal chats with people so they can start toying with these concepts, learn the fundamentals, and grasp it. Oftentimes, I'll bring my coworkers and my team to the events that we do. And whether it's our event or I'm attending somebody else's event, I like to bring people with. So if I'm busy, they can talk to a coworker or someone, but it's very validating when they can hear it from other people as well. And they don't need to use me as a lender. It's not some sort of, life isn't just a game of how much you can accumulate. You know, life is, I think, more fulfilling if you show other people and then they have that light bulb moment. So in conclusion, I think it's just about sharing information without worrying about what you get in return. And then I think it's about showing others that others have done it as well. I once had a team event, and the team was all getting manicures, and the nail tech was like, "Who are you guys, and why are you all such in a good mood?" And then she ended up coming to one of our events, and she ended up looking at buying real estate and multifamily specifically. So that, like, just how you described how you operate your business totally makes sense. You come from a place of abundance, and like you just like give the information freely, and then it comes back to you tenfold. So it might not be that person that you talk to, but you know, like, feel like the universe is blessing you with probably 5 other people that are like, yeah, I've heard great things about you. I want to work with you. Yeah, that whole treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah,
it works in business as well. It turns out it's not just about.
It's interesting how many people don't know that or don't realize that.
It's not just about like giving an extra good tip at the coffee shop or holding the door for someone. It applies to the way you conduct yourself in your career as well, I think.
Yeah, I would 1000% agree. So our team works with a lot of single women who buy real estate. The interesting thing when I knew you and I were going to be doing this interview is so many of the single women that we work with buy condos and townhomes. Some of them buy single family, but they're not really buying multifamilies. And I was thinking back, and in the last like 20 years, I've had one woman do it. She was in a committed relationship. She bought a place as a single, herself. Mm-hmm. And then the relationship imploded, but thankfully she owns her duplex, and she's owned it for forever, 15, 18 years, something like that. Why, like, how can women think about this as like building their portfolio and their wealth and generational wealth? Like, why are we not thinking bigger? Like, what do you see on the mortgage side of things?
Well, I think one interesting phenomenon that might have got nothing to do with, the guys that say they're handy or can fix something or this or that, or whatever reason something might be looked at as perhaps male dominated or whatever, is, when I was younger, I kept being in a relationship that I thought might go someplace. And so I needed to not pursue my dreams in case that went someplace. I remember I was dating somebody that was hell-bent on moving to Costa Rica. And then there I am trying to like look at jobs in Costa Rica and be like, I guess, I guess I could like move there.
Yeah.
Then I was dating somebody who was trying to relocate to California. Because no one wants to stay in Minnesota, I guess, when they're young.
But we all come back.
We do.
I've moved away several times. I always come back.
Exactly. So I think when I got into my 30s, and I got my first place when I was 30 or 31. And that's, I think, when I had this mental shift. And I was like, you know what? Boy, I would love to fall in love and get married and have kids. But I can't postpone working on me any longer. Mm-hmm. And
we say that to women on this show all the time too.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm glad to hear that it's not just like a girl thing.
No, I think it's a universal experience. And I actually didn't really draw the comparison until just now, kind of just speaking it out loud.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to say something out loud to really think about it, really hear it. So one, I always encourage people to work on themselves. I encourage people to invest for themselves, because then when they are in that relationship down the road, well, great. They can still have all of their romantic dreams. They'll just be a little bit richer.
Who doesn't love that? Let's talk about ratio. Do you know, like, from like the business that your team does, like what your percentage of like men versus women are buying like investment property, multi-units, like that type of thing?
Yeah, I actually looked that up yesterday and ran a few reports through our software to kind of look back at my client base. And in the last 2 years, I have helped 191 people buy multifamily. So that's just duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes.
So awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't include, somebody buying a a cabin up north to rent it out, or a
Just a
place in
single family,
Arizona,
whatever,
or
yeah.
or even a single family
Yeah.
for Airbnb. I'm talking just duplex, triplex, fourplex. Of the 191 people, 57 of them were individual women. So no spouse on the application with them, just them. Now, they might have been in a relationship. I don't always ask personal sort of questions other than show me your credit, show me your tax return, show me your bank account.
Right.
I don't get that personal.
Right.
So, but yeah, 57 women. So that accounts for roughly, equates to about 29%. And so 29% of my client base in the last 2 years are women buying rental property.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think
that number could be so much higher.
I think so. I think it could be. I see no reason that this should be some sort of male-dominated field.
No, it's awesome like how much room for growth there is in that number.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, let's talk about some of like the practical aspects of investing and being a landlord. So like the financing. I know like for me, that's the first thing. I get stopped at the finance. We're like, I don't have money for this. Where am I going to start? Like, what do you tell people?
Well, that's a lot of what we do is we have these informal chats. We have, if people want, they apply online. We can also give them an exact pre-approval. But in a lot of these speakings, we're going to break down the different amounts that you need. If you're going to own your occupy or house hack, if you're going to live there as your primary residence, you can get away with way less money down. I bought my first duplex rental property with only $2,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yep.
People think you need like tens of thousands of dollars.
Right. Of course, it feels that way. It feels like such a large, heavy thing, but there's not as much barrier to entry. At least in Minnesota, it's a very consumer-friendly, state to buy property. And then when that house went up in value, I was able to take a second mortgage out on it or a home equity line of credit and leverage that. And I used that as my down payment for duplex number 2. So I actually used $2,000 of my checking on the first house, 0 of my checking on the second house. And you kind of just fall into a groove and then you can rinse and repeat. Legally.
The Burr method, is that kind of what that is?
Absolutely. Buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat.
Yeah.
And hopefully you don't have to do that much renovation.
Yeah.
My first house didn't need much. I did some things out of pride of ownership. And that made me just confident enough to be dangerous. And then I took on a whole house, like sort of gut flip situation for my second home.
And then did you move into that next one then?
I did.
And then make the first one, just then both units you rented out.
Yep.
Do you still own your first property?
Absolutely. Have
you sold any?
I've bought many houses. I've never sold one. Wow. So if anyone here is thinking of selling their home, I encourage them to talk to Beth and not me. Because she's sold many houses for people and I have not.
That's so interesting. I love that though, that you have your first property still.
Absolutely.
Is it like your baby?
It's
the first one.
A good parent loves all of their children equally.
Yeah. My mom loves me way more than my sisters. So we talked about not really having to have deep pockets, but like say you're not doing the house hacking and you're not going to live in it. We've been talking about this on social, to have like a line of credit ready. Tom Ferry, my coach, always says when the world goes on sale, you need to have access to money. Yeah. So like if you're doing if you're not non-owner occupied, meaning you want to just, you live in a house somewhere else and then you want to start doing this, what does that look like? Where do most people that you work with find money for that sort of thing? Are they using like a home equity line of credit? Yeah, I always encourage that just because it's easy. I do have a video soon coming out about staying liquid and having home equity lines of credit. One time I met a client who had 5 rental properties. They were kind of old school, so they were older, and all their houses were paid off. And the problem was they found another house they wanted, and they had no money for it. They had no way to buy it because they had both retired, and they were showing losses on all their properties, intentionally not showing much profit. So they had no jobs. Looked like all their properties were losing money, even though they were all paid off. Right. I mean, so they're making a ton of money, actually. Yeah, and they had a huge portfolio and no way to buy their 6th place. So what they failed to do along the way is stay liquid or get lines of credit or keep existing lines of credit open. One thing that I always do before I move out and buy a property is I open up a home equity line of credit because
The home equity line of credit doesn't have the 12-month rule that you have to live there for 12 months once you open it. As long as you're still sleeping there while you open it, you can get a home equity line of credit. And now here we are many years later, I can still access the line of credit against my first duplex, even though I don't live there.
Wow. I always tell people, like, your line of credit is doing nothing. You're not charged on anything on it if you're not using it. But it's just good to have access to money. You never know when you're going to need it.
The theory is when you need it is when you can't get it.
You can't get it. Right. It's so true.
If you are losing your job or need some quick money to pay for some medical surgery or put a kid through college or whatever, when you need the money, it's going to be harder to get it. Yeah. Get that line of credit while your home value is high, while you're gainfully employed, while rates are still pretty good. Get that line of credit. Home equity lines of credit are only like anywhere from $0 to $1,000 of closing costs.
Yeah, we just did ours, and it was, I don't know, $900 or something like that.
Typically, $500 of that is an appraisal. And if you are okay with taking a lower value, some places don't even need to do an appraisal. I typically want to get as large as I can, so I'm always trying to get that appraisal.
That's what we did too. Yeah. I'm like, we need to squeeze every dollar out of this.
Yep. And I don't do home equity lines of credit, but I have a lot of good contacts that do. So oftentimes people will email us and I'll connect them. Oh, use Mike for this, or use Chris for this, or use Lori for that. So I've got a lot of nerdy banking friends, just like me.
Well, you have to in your line of work, I would imagine. Yeah. You got a Rolodex full of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so always happy to connect people. You just got to treat us as we want to be treated and share info, even if it's not something I do. I know the people that do it.
Right.
But what you asked about, well, what if they want to get into this game, but they're not willing to move in, right? It's definitely easier, whether you're a man, woman, or, non-gender specific, whatever the case is. If it's just you, it's easy to buy a duplex and move in, right? You don't need as many bedrooms because you don't have 3 kids. You don't need a certain school district. You might be okay living by a busy street. But if you're older or if you have a family, now you're not going to move from Maple Grove to that duplex behind the U of M that's only 2 bedrooms, right?
No.
You're not. So at that point, it's smart to take a home equity line of credit against your current house, use that as the down payment to buy a property. If it's going to be a 4-plex or a duplex, you're probably going to need 25% down. If it's a 1-unit, here's a cool catch. If it's only a 1-unit rental property, whether it's a single family, we at Bell can do 15% down. If it's going to be a cabin,
a big difference.
Yeah, and if it's a cabin or a vacation home for you, or condo somewhere, then it's only 10% down.
Yeah.
Now, there's still some end game, and this is kind of where I coach and help people go from 0 to 10 properties. Is once you hit a certain income level, there are various banks that will give you private client status, and then they're going to give you a line of credit against rental properties, even though most banks don't want to give them against rental properties, only primary residences. That's why I mentioned it's important to get one before you move out.
Yeah.
So then when you get to a certain threshold of assets, you can start getting other loans that you couldn't previously get against all of your rental properties if you want to pull some of your capital back. Because not a lot of people would have many rentals if it took 25% down payment. I mean, that's like $100,000.
Right.
So how, if money doesn't grow on trees,
right,
and you don't come from money, well, how are you just going to continually have $100,000 in your savings at all times? No. So part of what helps me keep this party going is once I buy a property, to then be able to take a line of credit or a commercial line or executive line, pull some of that down payment back and redeploy that capital into the next project. Just so it doesn't sound like I am being overly optimistic here. I want to, like, full disclosure, I want to tell people, hey, you're paying interest on those lines of credit, right? So you have to be careful.
Well, your tenant is.
Right. Or the tenants are. But you got to be careful that whatever you're going to redeploy that capital into, you got to make sure that next project is juicy enough to cover all that extra interest, because you are increasing your payment now, right? So I think on a couple episodes ago, you talked about people treating their homes as an ATM. Yeah. And I was driving thinking, boy, am I kind of doing that? Have I done that a little bit? And,
I don't think so, because you're all reinvesting into properties. I feel like when people were doing that in 07, 08, it's like, oh, we're going to take our kids to Disney. You probably shouldn't be doing that with your home equity line of credit. You should probably be doing that with your regular job.
Yeah, if
Where you're like, I'm going to get a new Corvette, that type of stuff. That's where I'm like, this is a slippery slope.
Yeah, when you're using it to buy things that are one and done.
Depreciating asset type thing.
Yep. Trips do create memories. Sports cars are fun. And now they appreciate, whereas before they didn't. So that's different, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to make sure that whatever you're putting that money into next is going to give you something. Is it going to give you cash flow? Is it going to give you appreciation? I've had clients where they are always obsessed with cash flow, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning, how many properties do I have to own, or how many doors? That's typically what the investors like to speak in, is the number of doors you own. So working the math backwards, how many doors do you need to quit your job? Yeah. Or how many doors do you need to guarantee that you can be extra comfy in retirement, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So some people are buying for cash flow.
Yep.
And some people are just buying for appreciation. Mm-hmm. I have always been focused on cash flow because when I first got my duplex, part of it was stabilizing my housing costs, getting it to where I could live for free, then getting it where I would profit on rent, then adding passive income. So for me, it's always been cash flow as a buy and hold investor. I plan to hold these properties for 30, 50 years. Who knows?
Right. Like your retirement plan.
Yeah. They're going to be extra money, or if Social Security isn't around, they're going to be my retirement.
Right.
Other people are just focused on appreciation. And so they're going to buy a property in trending markets, whether it's certain trendy spots of Minneapolis or trendy spots of certain parts of Minnesota and neighborhoods with good schools, or maybe Austin, Texas. I've had clients buying properties there, and they're not worried about how much rent they do or do not get. Mm-hmm. They're just expecting to sell them for $100,000 more in just 3 years.
It's interesting how everybody's business model is so different with that.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to do it, is there? It's just different methodologies.
These are just tools. Yeah. My duplex mentor, he's super handy, and I just assumed he grew up in the trades or had family. He could fix anything, right? Does all the work himself. Turns out he's actually a retired computer guy from California, and he said he started buying up houses just because he figured they had to go up in value.
Yeah.
So he was buying them up during 2008 and times like that. So if you are looking for ways to get ahead, real estate is a pretty safe one just based on the way our tax structures work. But I'm not quick to push that on anyone. Mm-hmm. There's things like Bitcoin. There's things like NFTs. There's a whole host
we had a
of
whole
ways
episode
to
about
make
that
money now.
With Ryan. He's like our crypto nerdy guy.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to make money now. Real estate is, I would say, one of the safer ways because the market shifts, but not as quick as stocks or crypto. There's also a lot of tax advantages. So while your building is appreciating, the IRS actually lets you depreciate it over a 27-year schedule. So you're getting to take that depreciation as a loss, even though it's just a paper loss. It's not a true cash loss.
Yeah.
Incentives are to direct you into how you should file and how the government wants you to create businesses and do things like that.
I love it. Well, so as a single gal buying a property, like really like anyone listening to this podcast, how do you maintain a property? Like, what if you're not handy and you're like, I want to get in the game, I want to have investment properties, and I don't know how to do anything? What do you tell that person?
I direct them to this video site called YouTube.
I tell all my clients that too. I'm like, you can literally figure out any home project on YouTube.
You can figure out everything. I've got a lot of clients too that are sharing things on Instagram and whatnot. One of my clients, Claire, is amazing. She is the most hardcore do-it-yourself. Keyword yourself. She doesn't need anyone to do it. And frankly, everything that you think you don't know how to do is just because you haven't done it before. Now, right. I'll admit, I am not as good as doing tile as my tile guy is.
Yeah.
The good news is you can try things, and then if you enjoy it, great. If you did an okay job, you just don't love it, then hire it out. Right. Even my buddy Jory, who's super handy, he always said, I don't do ceilings and I don't do floors. Mm-hmm. He says, those are two things I hate, and I'll pay it out. Mm-hmm. I'll hire it out.
And then I'll do everything else.
Yep. And if you are not a do-it-yourselfer, or maybe like for instance, me, I was very hands-on and doing as much as I could myself when I started, but now I got to try to buy my time back. I can't be all places at once. So I'm hiring out every single thing I can. And guess what? I'm still making a profit because rents have gone up so much.
Yeah.
And so it's okay if you don't know how to do everything or do the work yourself. This podcast is about you buying rental property, not you becoming a contractor.
True.
And
True.
I have to.
But I think it's the thing that like gives people pause.
It
They're
does.
like, well, like I don't know what to do. I can come up. I can scrape together the money, and I would love to live in the place, and then what? But
Right.
like this happens to a lot of single women
But I want to remind them
thing.
that you buy a cute old house in St. Paul, Minneapolis, whatever. The old house, that single family, that's going to need just as much fixing as
Sure.
a duplex. The difference is nobody's giving you a check every month also.
True.
And I think there are a few horror stories of people that say, oh, geez, the foundation was bad or this or that. But that's actually more of an anomaly or a rarity than it is the norm.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to mention, I have a lot of people that say, oh, geez, well, it's going to need a new roof. I got to save up for that. No, you don't. You just pray for hail every spring.
No, right?
And then you call your insurance company and you get a new
yeah.
roof for free, or at least the cost of your deductible.
Totally. Totally. What are some pitfalls that you've experienced that you're like, okay, if I knew then what I know now? Like, what would you have
Patience.
avoided? Yeah.
I think patience. Really, try not to work with any handyman or contractors unless somebody has been recommended to you. As savvy as I want to sound today, I'm still the same guy that's like, oh no, I'm hosting family Christmas this year. You know what? My family that loves me, I bet they'll judge me if I don't have a new bathroom. Let's do a new bathroom and my regular guys are busy. I'll just take this Yahoo that I met at a networking meeting that no one's ever heard of. I'll just trust that he'll do it. And so patience.
That sounds bad.
If you don't work with anyone that hasn't been like recommended or testimonial from a friend. And I also want to push back on this half up front. There's no reason you have to give half up front. These contractors that say it's going to be a $10,000 job and they want $5,000 from you.
Great.
That's terrible. I will, as the saying goes, cookie crumb them. So I tell them, hey man, I'll give you a check every day you show up. Whether it's $500 or $1,000, I'll give you a check every day you're here working. But I'm not okay with just giving someone $5,000 and then, because that happened to me once, and then he was on his way, be there soon for like 3 months. And
We see so much of that with contractors and like vendors right now. It's terrible.
Yep. So
It's like, why are you overcommitting and under-delivering? It's the worst.
yeah. So
And being terrible communicators makes me crazy.
yeah, and it's really a shame because with how many people you know, Beth, you could probably be the goose that laid the golden egg for these vendors and contractors. But it's tough to find people that follow through and do what they say. And when I find those people, I hold on to them.
We do. We scrub our preferred vendor list pretty regularly because there's people that are like, 6 months ago you did a great job and now you're freaking terrible. Like, what is going on with you?
Yep.
Do you all of a sudden have a drug addiction or something I need to know about? Like, I'll drive you to Betty Ford. Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
But it's really terrible because it's an extension of my brand and my name and the company.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is, I always thought I needed a guy.
Yeah.
Plumbers are super expensive. I better have a guy.
Yeah.
And I had this plumber who was good for a while that just went MIA. And I had a similar situation where I had to just keep calling and checking on him because, he was struggling with addiction. But
I was totally joking about that, but you actually had that happen.
yeah, because when you stop and think about it, there's not necessarily a reason that contractors, plumbers, electricians, whoever have to be on their own. They could work at a company. Some of these people might not have fit in well in a company, whether they didn't feel fairly compensated or they were late and they got yelled at for no good reason or something. Or maybe they just couldn't fit in. So sometimes you got to be careful that somebody who is self-employed in those fields, you don't know.
Didn't play well with others.
They might not play well. Yeah. And so are they going to play well with you?
Right.
And everyone puts on a smile and a good face when they are interviewing.
Yeah.
So this thing of me feeling like I needed to have a guy almost brought me more headache and stress than had I just called a major plumbing outfit that's like on the Better Business Bureau and has their
Right.
logo on fancy trucks and things like that.
Yeah.
So now I'm paying retail price for plumbers while flipping a house or doing whatever instead of a guy. Guess what? Turns out not much more. So
well, and they show up and they get stuff done.
they
We
have
experienced
clipboards
that
and I
with our
get
last
PDF
flip.
receipts too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like everything is done. You're not sweating the small stuff. They do it all.
Yep. So if I'm speaking to someone out there listening to this podcast that's thinking about buying a rental property, but they aren't handy, they have never hung sheetrock, they have never demoed up space or added a bedroom, just know that there are professionals out there that you can hire if you don't know it or don't want to learn it, or you don't want to hunt through randoms and hope this guy will maybe show up or not. You can still pay retail and still do well in this space.
That's good to know, because I think a lot of people think that if you call like the fancy guy with the nice looking trucks, that it's like exponentially more expensive.
That does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
That's where you need a good loan officer and a good realtor to help give you a barometer.
Hint, hint.
Yeah. Work with somebody that's been through it. Don't just work with somebody who's incredibly good looking like Beth just cause. Work with someone who has also been through it, who's gotten her hands dirty, who's done flips,
Yeah.
who isn't just selling a dream that they're not also buying into. That's
Yeah.
important. And so they can be a really good reality check, and they can tell someone to pound sand or tell them like, no way, this is not a good deal. You should not take this 15 grand bid.
Yeah.
Also, if I could go back to younger me, I would say two more bits of advice would be always start finding other contractors, handyman, vendors, even when you don't need something to be fixed. The same reason you want to get lines of credit before you need them, the same reason you want to build out that vendor list and have good people before something leaks. And the third thing I really want to say to my younger self is don't be afraid to find birds of the feather and then partner on investments. I was always afraid, so I stunted my growth as an investor. I could have had way more properties by now, but I was intentionally only doing it until I could buy another one by myself. You remember those group projects in high school and you get stuck doing everyone's work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were worried about that?
I kept envisioning the worst, or I said, what happens? And I had these delusions of grandeur. I was like, what happens when me and one of my business partners on my 100-unit building that I don't even own develops a drinking problem or has a huge divorce, and then do I lose half my building or whatever? Or all these crazy thoughts. And here I am with one house. Well,
Right.
Find somebody you trust. Find somebody who has the same goals. Maybe you don't even know them that well, but if they got the same goals, and I've also been told, look at the way they make decisions. Do they cut corners? Do they communicate well?
Kind of like looking for a significant other. Not a whole lot different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Except it's probably easier to find an investor partner than a
Right.
soulmate, is my guess. But if you can invent a swiping right thing for investing partners, Beth, let me know. I will.
We'll get an app made.
Yeah,
Oh
I'll
my
double
God, that'd
down
be
on
so
that
funny.
app. So that's the other thing is now I'm partnering with a lot of people, and I never did before. I'm doing it now because I'm out of capacity. I've still got capital to invest, but man, I can't be every place at once.
Right.
And so I think I could have grown faster and acquired more properties had I partnered sooner, but it felt scary.
Well, I can appreciate that because it all feels scary to me in some form or fashion. What do you see? Do you see women, like, do you talk through, like, thinking about, like, getting a prenup? So, like, a single woman buys a property and then they're thinking about getting married and, like, maybe you're still in conversations about them buying more properties. Do you talk about, like, them protecting their assets?
I talk about it when they bring it up. A lot of times the talks will start with when they buy a personal property, do they need to buy it in an LLC or move it into an LLC? And part of that is to do asset protection, things like that. And sometimes the conversation goes over to prenup, or one thing that's extra secure is if they want to put their home in a trust. I always thought that trusts were something that you didn't need unless you were the daughter of the woman who invented Velcro or,
Right.
hairspray or whatever, some unique product that we all know. Or I thought it required millions to have. But, even a simple estate attorney can set up a trust. Mm-hmm. And then down the road, that trust can give you leverage to do other things and do certain types of loans and things. So prenup is something that everyone should look into. Trusts are another thing, just because these are just legal vehicles to
and
protect your assets.
Protects you if anything were to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They've always encouraged that for my husband in law enforcement. They're like, well, if something were to go bad in the line of duty, you should have a lot of your stuff in a trust so your personal assets are protected. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Never occurred to me before meeting him.
And it wasn't occurring to me either. It's just one of those things where, I'm not married yet. Bridget and I haven't been dating that long, just eight years now. So I haven't had to worry about that.
Podcast, she's gonna be like, I roll.
Yeah. So
we haven't dated 20 years yet.
And if she is listening, just make sure, honey, Beth suggested the prenup, not me. So, but
Bridget, get a prenup.
But I think the older I get, I definitely think that's going to be more acceptable. I mean, if you meet someone when you're 35 or 38, like I am, holy cow, you've had a whole, I was just coaching a client on this recently, because she had finally met a guy that shares her investing vision and wants to build an empire and fix stuff and buy more properties. She had already 2 or 3 properties before she met him, and he's got one. And, so she was kind of asking me about this is going so well. I don't want to jinx it, but I kind of want to protect myself. And so we were discussing that. And
and it's not a love thing. It's like a responsibility thing.
Yeah. And if you met someone, you're both 20 and both broke, fine.
Right.
But if you meet somebody in your 30s, you got to give yourself credit that you've had over a decade to get through emotional breakdowns, professional hangups that you didn't get that promotion or that job you thought you were going to get, surviving your high school reunion, all that drama. You got through it. And so whatever wealth you have accumulated or are about to accumulate, you got to understand that it's not just a wealth thing. How many of us have had personal stuff sidetrack our goals? Man, I've gained weight, I've lost weight, I've felt mentally healthy, and I've felt mentally unwell. And all of that plays into where you're at. It's not just a wealth game, it's a survival game, in my opinion. So to think that the prenup is complete slap in the face is kind of almost, it discounts how much you've gotten through, I think. So I encourage it to be more of a talk about how much you've how far you've come, and not just a me, taking my ball and going home sort of vibe. I
love that. It gets a bad rap, but I think a lot of women are not protecting themselves because they think that it all it's going to mean I love that person less. No, probably means you love yourself more if you're going to protect your assets.
And I'm not an estate attorney, and at this point of the podcast, I want to say that I
cannot give you legal advice.
Not giving you legal advice. But one thing I would look into is if you do feel that prenup is anti-romantic, perhaps just look at putting your home in a trust.
Yeah.
And you can actually quit claim the title of your home for very little money. Just pay some
the filing fees.
Yeah, some very nominal county fees.
Probably under $100.
Yep. And maybe the estate attorney needs $300 drafted up. I'm unsure, but definitely under $1,000.
Yeah.
You can move the title of your home into a trust. Now, you can then down the road here have a family trust, one or a marital trust, but you can definitely have your own trust first, right? So that might be a loophole. Again, check with an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice, and I might even be a little bit off base here, but that might be a loophole to create some sort of extra security for yourself that isn't just your basic prenup.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting how many more people are talking about trusts, like buying an investment property and putting it into a trust. And if you have the right attorney, they're gonna guide you in the right direction for what makes sense for your scenario.
Yep. And this is a lot of what I do is talking with people, because all of this feels overwhelming. But hey, I've got good news for you. You don't need all this stuff till you get to that point.
Right.
This is not needed to buy your first home.
No.
This is not needed even when you own 2 houses.
Yeah.
A lot of the things about getting an LLC to protect yourself and things like that aren't needed until you have 3 properties or more.
Okay.
And so there's so many things that might seem overwhelming because we're hitting you with a lot of info right now. But you don't learn calculus in 4th grade. They don't hit you with that boring stuff until you're in 9th grade, right?
Right.
So if you would think about all the different math things you had to learn, the algebra, the geometry, the calculus, all of that stuff, it would feel overwhelming. But, in school, we only take what we're learning at that year. Think of investing as the same way. You only need to know enough until you're at that step. And then you learn more when you're at the next step.
Yeah.
But at any point, you can get off that game. You can get off that ride. I think, if I'm not going on too much of a riff here, Beth, I think there's 3 investors. There's 3 types of investors that I deal with, typically. One type is an accidental investor. Perhaps, so I had a woman who, her aunt, for some reason, was into this. So her aunt owned like 2 or 3 duplexes. Sadly, her aunt passed away, and she inherited them.
And she's like, now what?
She's like, hey, I guess I'm a landlord now.
Yeah.
And she actually excelled at it, and she did well, but didn't feel a need to get more.
Yeah.
No, she liked her job. She's like, hey, I just got 3. I'm good.
Right.
So that's the accidental investor. And you could maybe classify somebody who bought a condo, then ended up getting married and moving into a different house and then just rents out their condo. So that's an accidental landlord. The second type of person is someone who says, you know what? I want to get to 10 properties. I want to then start buying commercial buildings. I want, I hate my job. I can't wait to tell my boss to, that I'm quitting. And they want to be a professional landlord. Their goal is to get as many as they can. Then there's the third type of landlord, which is kind of what I am. And that's where, I'd like to have some, but I'm okay if I don't take over the world and quit my job. I love my job. I love what I do. I just want to guarantee that my retirement is extra comfy.
Right.
And also what I was able to do is get enough properties now to where I can then buy a big fancy single family, and the rent from all the duplexes help me cover that payment. So
that's huge.
It can also lead you to that sort of shining house on the hill.
Yeah.
Like you, Beth. And so it can be a means to an end.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to become your thing. And those are really the 3. Those are really the 3 that I'm seeing, and I'm somewhere in the middle of all that.
It's cool, though, that there isn't really a right or wrong way to do it, is what I'm hearing you say. And you can dabble, you can go into the deep end of the pool, like anything you want, like anything in between, and you can potentially still make money on it and create generational wealth.
Yeah. And
So
I think
cool.
right now I'd like to see a lot of women stepping up, and men too, buying rental property, because we just made it through our first pandemic. Let's pat ourselves on the back.
Right.
I think it's an endemic right now, or I don't know what it is, what we are in.
I don't even know what the title is now.
But if we're through it, or mostly, that was a time where there was an eviction moratorium. So a lot of the, places said you couldn't evict somebody just because of not paying rent.
Right.
You had to prove they were a real safety hazard, whether it was guns or police arrests or something, or drug use.
Did that freak you out? Did you have people not paying?
Actually, every single tenant paid. I never had one
I would
missed
say
payment.
all of my, I don't have a ton of investor clients like you do, but same thing. All of them paid rent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, you're so lucky.
Right. And
I know. I don't know if that's the Minnesota nice in people, that they didn't dare not pay rent of some sort, but I haven't heard too many horror stories.
I think
I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah. And I've definitely had some clients that didn't receive rent. It kind of depends. Sometimes it's how you treat people.
Right.
And I always make it a point to know that my tenants aren't renting from some faceless property manager or landlord or slumlord or hedge fund somewhere. They're renting from me. And that's why I'm also attentive at getting things fixed. And so that personalizes a bit. But if we just made it through that, and now the eviction moratorium has been lifted, so if that's not in the way, and if we are supposedly going into a recession, even though there's not going to be foreclosures like there was last time for many different reasons, which I could go into, would probably be a separate podcast. But the reason why a lot of actors and actresses buy rental properties and that is because if everything fails, you can at least sleep in it. Now, you can't sleep in a stock.
Yeah.
And if other people, I really, really don't want them to go through foreclosure because it's just, I mean, gosh, breakups are hard enough. Can you imagine foreclosures? So going through it's hard. I don't wish that on anyone. But if people are going through that, they still need a place to live. Okay, where are they going to go? They're going to come to me and I'm going to rent space to them.
Right.
So I view it as a safe, secure way to invest on a tangible asset. And I'm going to sound like an old by not saying I have any NFTs, but I don't. And not to mention this tangible asset has a lot of legal tax trickery you can do with it and strategery. So I haven't found something that I feel is as safe and profitable as multifamily investing. But I'm open. I'm open to it. And I think that's important.
You can talk to Ryan about NFTs. He'll tell you all about it.
Good.
He's like the crypto NFT guru that we have around here.
Good. We'll cash it in, Ryan, and buy some duplexes.
An NFT.
What's that?
You could turn one of your properties, like create an NFT with one of your properties.
No way.
I don't know. You can do something. Sell tokens or sell something. I don't know how that all works. Well, oh my God, you like broke my brain. That is a lot of good information. And I hope that anyone that's listening to this episode really like gets the gist that you don't need to know it all. You just need to take the action steps. We'll connect you with Conor and he'll like break it down into bite-sized pieces about how you can get into this investment game.
Yeah. Because somebody had to do that for me too.
Right.
So find your nerd, and there's a lot of people out there that want to share information. And I encourage you to come to one of our events or come to another event, because I think the Instagram's great. I'm on it all the time. The problem is it's kind of like this 60-second society, and some of these ideas need to be fleshed out in more longer format, and you need to ask questions. And so sometimes that's what I do with people on the phone, is sort through their financial stuff and figure out how this is going to work for them, if it's something they want to do.
Yeah.
And some people might not do it, but they just want to talk it out to be like, okay, cool. I just needed to know what it was. I mean, we all like looking at the menu before we order.
Right. Right. Well, where can people find you?
They can find me at closingwithconor.com. That's Closing with Conor, Conor with one N, but don't worry, I bought the misspelling as well. You put as many N's in my name and you'll still find me. You can also find me at hashtag Closing with Conor on Instagram. And then definitely email us. Everything on my team works through email. Email is the best way to get directed to the right person. Whether you want to talk to me, whether you want to apply online, whether you want to talk to my business partner, Jen or Sarah, and hear their investment journey, we're here to help.
That's so awesome. I love it. Well, I'm so glad you're on the podcast today.
It was super fun meeting you last week and getting to hang out. Yay. And then having it eventually turn into a podcast and seeing what you do so well. It's cool.
It's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, so reach out to Conor. And if you have a hard time finding him, which I don't think you will, reach out to me and I will make the connection for you. But until next time, bus bench babes, keep your face off a bus bench and keep being the badass boss babes that you are.
Yeah.
Okay, girls, are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.